Let's step back in time. Let's look at the philosophy of embodiment, the body, and the space where medical circles and philosophy came together in the early 20th century. So phenomenology was thrust as a new movement into popular culture by a German philosopher of Jewish origin called Edmund Husserl. Now, he claimed that phenomenology was a radical way of doing philosophy. Radical, woo, right? So the human body, our bodies, and its phenomena were being brought into awareness to both philosophical and medical circles, okay? Before they were separate, the split between mind and body. So his work was to reinvigorate the field of philosophy by returning its focus to the living human body. Okay, so let me explain what this is quite simply. That a phenomenological method brackets an experience. So think of a bracket, something being frozen in time. So if my shoulder's tight now, let's just look at what's going on there, the shoulder. Not why, not that I may have just picked up a heavy box or been doing some weights or somebody's stressing me out. It's that tension here. So we're really bringing it into the moment. So it's taking place in the here and now, while suspending all assumptions that you would normally think about it, like, oh, that's the shoulder she carries her bag on or whatever, right? So the focus of this method is for the client, not the therapist, not you, right? It's for me to carefully describe things as they appear into consciousness in the moment. So I'm dropping this in here. We're talking about the unconscious stuff, the shadow, the net, the shadow of our stuff that's going on unconsciously coming into consciousness, right? As in the here and now. It's coming into consciousness right now. So often in therapy, you see it with the client with the tapping foot, right? So it might be the tapping foot, a cough, rubbing their neck, the pace that they're walking at. They might be walking really slow or really fast. Sometimes I have clients who are at the door before me when I'm walking to the door. Eye contact, they might yawn, not bothered. Yeah, so it's what phenomena is coming into play. So, and it's important for you, if you're working with this, to have no expectations to interpret this. What Edmund said was that by deeply, profoundly inquiring into the witness of all knowledge, this specific philosophical inquiry opens up into contemplative awareness. So what's happening is the unconscious is coming into consciousness. Very often with the tapping foot, when you say to a client, I notice that your foot's tapping, what's going on? They'll say, I don't want to be here, I'm worried about time. Let the client speak it, but it cuts straight to what is going on for the client in their body, what they're carrying. So a phenomena will occur in the moment in therapy. So I'm going to encourage you to start to notice this from right now, right? So the next client, the next person, even start practicing it in the world, right? So what are you noticing with your family members, people around you, work colleagues? What's happening in the moment, or in a meeting, just watching someone, right? And by noticing these moments, we start to begin to work with the body in therapy. So there's no touch, there's no going in, there's no intervention. I'm asking you to start to raise your awareness to what you are noticing in the other person. And often, it is these moments that we remember, whether we're in supervision, whether we're reflecting on the work with someone or how somebody was, what they did, because they're charged with an energy. That energy can be high or low, but that's what we're remembering, how they walked, how they spoke, their tone of voice, the spine, where their body was, and they're always non-verbal. Right, so this is where this area becomes really hard. It's a non-verbal area. Okay, so you are sensing what is going on in the other person. So beginning to notice. That's the first bit of homework. From now, go and start to notice what the phenomena that is happening in the moment. Now, Edmund's work on body awareness quickly gain momentum. It was very fashionable at the time, very exciting at the time, and this is in the early 20th century, so a long time ago, right? So he saw himself as a bit of a pioneer into this new domain of researching consciousness, yeah, and also as part of that consciousness, getting in touch with the authentic self. So as if the self, by doing this work, is trying to communicate with us in the here and now, okay? So he wrote about the self. The self is the mental individual from which all mental acts issue and is only presented to us indirectly. So again, I'm asking you to look for something that's being presented to you indirectly. Now, his students continued his legacy in research, the most famous one being a French philosopher called Maurice Merleau-Ponty. And he really had a strong presence of Edmund's work in his own evolving thoughts. So the legacy's being continued here, more with the body. So his main area of interest lay in placing attention on the human body, and that the human body is the primary site for all humans, for me, for you, for us, of knowing the world. So we experience the world through our body, okay? And he maintained that the body and all that is perceived, they cannot be disentangled from each other. So we are our body. They're not separate. Mind and body are not separate. And I'm highlighting here that at the time, yeah, of course, now you might be going, yeah, well, yeah, fine, of course, Lorna. At the time, this was hugely controversial. And I would actually still say it still is, especially in some medical fields where a doctor is, or medical professionals do not take into consideration, because of time, because the NHS doesn't have a lot of money, actually what is going on in a person's environment. So rather than giving them a tablet to fix the thing, right, giving them drugs to numb them or whatever that may be, to actually look at what is going on in a person's universe. Why are they feeling like that? What are they not getting? What do they need? Okay? And that's why we're looking at this work as an alternative in some spaces to numbing people with medication. So he did speak that my body is visible and mobile, and it's not just a chunk of space, but it is intertwining of vision and movement, okay? Flesh is at the heart of the world. The body is both the perceiver and perceived, giving an experience in the flesh, or flesh. Oh, right, so we're talking about flesh, right? He said that things are encrusted in the flesh of the body, just as the body is part of the fabric of the world. I love that. I'm going to say that again. Things are encrusted in the flesh of the body, just as the body is part of the fabric of the world. So flesh indicates a certain experience of a surface which has an inside. There is something within the flesh, okay, that has an inside, where the inside and the outside meet. And he referred to it as that matter is pregnant. So when the thing is happening, when that phenomenon takes place, it's pregnant with information. So Merleau-Ponty criticised the popular behavioural psychology at the time. So these are people who would say it can all be fixed in the brain, right? Disconnected with the body. A bit like CBT today. So arguing that complex human behaviour cannot be explained in rigid mechanical responses to stimuli. So he had a real pop at the time about, the Pavlov's dog. So the study that if you ring a bell, the dog's going to salivate. So he really did cause a lot of controversy here. And he suggested that behaviour psychologists assume that a client feels nothing, and a body cannot be understood by a mere sum of its parts. And I'd say that tension and conflict still exists today amongst therapists who are, for example, CBT therapists, who historically, now more and more of them are interested in working with the body, but they're not taking into awareness what is going on and how the body is impacted by other things that are going on. As a counter-argument, he offered a different account for human activity, and he started to speak more about a tradition called Gestalt Psychology. Now, a Gestalt means form, it's a German word, whole, and it emphasised that humans perceive entire patterns, not just individual components. So we feel by something happening in our environment, yeah, that will impact us and how we are feeling. I also want to point out here that Merleau-Ponty was criticised by female phenomenologists, right, and female critics at the time, because he really portrayed a male body experience only. There was no nothing in his work about the female body. And still today, this exists in science in many spaces. I'll give you a quick example with neurodiversity, ADHD, Asperger's, autism. It's all been written for boys, for men, and often women, still now today, have been missed. Thank God for things on YouTube like what is it, ADHD. There's a lady who does a great channel on there. There's a lot more stuff, but it's really only recent that the women's bodies and the experience of women is being taken into consideration rather than a male blueprint being put on top of that. I'll let you have a think about that and get curious about that. Okay, so women were neglected by the dominant intellectual male ethos. And we're looking at the early 20th century here, right? Going into the 40s. So they were this male ethos at the time, so they were omitted from the evolving story of phenomenology. So this is the beginning of the working with body and therapy movement, no women. However, the women did attract a few pioneering women philosophers who I will mention, okay? So we've got Hedwig Conrad Mort, Edith Stein, and some more people that I will mention soon. Edith Stein was interested in the phenomenology of empathy and personal embodiment, and her ideas strongly influenced Merleau-Ponty. Okay, so she wasn't after him, her work was influencing him. So please have a look at Edith Stein. Also a lady called Hannah Ordant. Very important to look at Hannah Ordant. So she's now been recognised as one of the most important political and phenomenological thinkers of the 20th century. And in her book, The Human Condition, she strives at any cost to eliminate difference, okay? So in the world, so she controversially at the time wrote about religion, gender, race and feminism at the time, right? Early 20th century. I hear women writers saying this now, that it's controversial to write about this. Is it? Yes, let's do it. Okay, so she placed a much stronger emphasis on being in the world with others who are different. I'm going to highlight this as well. So she wasn't just talking about gender and feminism. She wasn't interested in that, in putting her energy on gender. Her work supports an understanding and to take away from women's stuff being seen as a problem. Okay, so rather than trying to find a solution or fix it. But she did come under criticism from feminist circles and feminist writers, as often in her work, and it's for you to contemplate why, she had a total silence in her work regarding questions about women. She had little time for thinking about people or systems being separate, things as being how a woman is with a man or within the family. For her thinking was at the time genderless, and she spoke about this in the early 20th century. So that's exciting to hear that. More recently, I want to highlight a feminist phenomenological analyst called Linda Fisher. She wrote, and I'll give the details below, about the role of voice, pitch of women. Listen to women speak and listen to their voices, the pace, the identity and the embodiment, okay? I'll put details of her work below. Also, a wonderful book called Carnal Thoughts by Sobchak in 2004. She looked at making sense meaning out of all bodily senses in relation to a woman, and really in relation to film and TV, and where the feminist female body merges with the image and flesh that we see on screen and consumers media. Really interesting book. So I want to ask you now to build on that noticing of clients, and maybe a little bit more subtle here, and really through the lens of tone, voice, so it's less obvious than the tapping foot or the sore shoulder, right? I'll move this, and this shoulder may hurt instead. I'm really asking you to get curious about pace, tone of voice, how people walk in the room. Can you notice people breathing? Can you notice their breath, their pace, their energy? Anxiety's higher, right? So if we're anxious and we're fast, we're scared of something, there's something going on. Lower can be more depressed, more low energy. So on a different level of noticing now, I'd like you to start to notice clients, people, start to see it, notice it, slow down, see their pace, listen. So using your senses.